So, when the Cold War finally ended back in 1991, I think everyone breathed this huge sigh of relief. We all hoped for an era of lasting peace. But here's the thing about conflict. It never really goes away. It just changes its shape. Today, we're going to explore how warfare completely evolved, how technology rewrote the rules of the battlefield, and how global power shifted in ways that almost nobody saw coming.
So, was this it? Was this really a new era of global peace? I mean, the optimism was through the roof. But in the shadows of this brand new world order, old tensions were already brewing, and new conflicts were just about to ignite. Okay, so let's look at that first decade, from 91 to 2001. On paper, the reality seemed pretty simple. The United States was the world's one and only superpower. But this new order was anything but stable. You had power vacuums and struggles for national identity, creating flashpoints all over the globe. Yeah, this slide really shatters that myth of a peaceful decade, doesn't it? It all kicked off with the 1991 Gulf War, which was just this stunning display of American high-tech military might broadcast live on TV. But then, right in Europe's own backyard, the breakup of Yugoslavia led to the absolute horror of the Bosnian War and genocide. This really forced a new kind of response: NATO's intervention in Kosovo, which is framed as the first major humanitarian war. And while the world was focused on these big, conventional wars, something else was quietly emerging. A new kind of enemy, one without a state, was being fueled by poverty, political instability, and foreign interventions, especially in the Middle East. And the most dangerous of these groups was, of course, Al-Qaeda. And that brings us to the single event that would pivot the entire world and redefine conflict for a generation, a day that truly, truly changed everything. September 11th, 2001. On this morning, the deadliest terrorist attack in history unfolded, and the world's sense of security was shattered in an instant. This wasn't just about geopolitics anymore. For millions, it felt personal, and it was absolutely terrifying. 2,977 innocent lives were lost. This number wasn't just a statistic. It felt like a declaration of a new kind of war, and the world's response would change the very definition of conflict. That response came in the form of the War on Terror, a global conflict that, in some ways, continues to this day. This wasn't a war against a country, but against a tactic, and that meant a whole new set of rules had to be invented. To really understand what happened next, you have to grasp this key concept: asymmetric warfare. This was the defining feature of the conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq. You see, on one side, you have a massive, high-tech military, and on the other, you've got smaller groups using totally unconventional tactics. Their goal wasn't to win a traditional battle. It was to exhaust the superpower, to make the war too long and too costly to continue. And this just perfectly illustrates the chain reaction that followed. First, the US invaded Afghanistan to go after Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. Then, in 2003, came the invasion of Iraq over claims of weapons of mass destruction, claims that were never actually proven. Well, removing Saddam Hussein created a massive power vacuum, which led directly to a brutal insurgency and civil war. And from that chaos, an even more terrifying group emerged: ISIS. This quote, it just drives home the reality of this new era. The war in Afghanistan dragged on for 20 years. These weren't quick, decisive victories like the first Gulf War. They were long, grueling conflicts with no clear end in sight. But the story doesn't end there. While the war on terror was raging, two other massive shifts were happening in parallel: the return of great power competition and a technological revolution that was completely transforming the battlefield. You can almost think of it as a Cold War 2.0, and this slide breaks down the difference perfectly. The players are no longer just the USA versus the USSR. Now it's the US against a rising China and a resurgent Russia. The fight isn't over ideology, but over technological and economic dominance. And the proxy wars have moved from places like Vietnam to new fronts like Syria and Ukraine. And this is where it starts to sound like science fiction, but it is 100% real. The battlefield itself has gone digital. Today, hackers can shut down a city's power grid. Drones can strike targets with incredible precision from the other side of the world with no soldiers on the ground. Satellites guide every move, and information itself has become a weapon through propaganda and online disinformation. This chart really shows you the money behind that shifting power dynamic. While the US still outspends everyone, just look at the rapid growth from China and the sustained investment from Russia.
This isn't just about budgets, it's a visual of the rising global competition we're all living through right now. But for all the talk of drones, cyber attacks, and superpowers, here's the one thing that never, ever changes. No matter how warfare evolves, its human cost is constant. Destroyed cities, broken families, and generations scarred by conflict. That is the enduring, tragic legacy of war. Which leaves us with this final, critical question. In an age of asymmetric warfare, digital battlefields, and renewed great power rivalries, who actually wins the war for the future? The answer is more uncertain than ever, and it's being written right now, in conflicts